So chapter 10 of The Liars. St. John's 8 years earlier. In many ways, Teddy White envied his friend, John MacDonald. Teddy's father had been killed by the police at a voting rally when Teddy had just passed his 10th birthday. His mother had remarried soon after, and despite his mother's less than sincere efforts to the contrary, his stepfather threw him out on the streets before he turned 13. His family moved away sometime after that, and he was on his own. Teddy ran with a gang of others like himself, stealing money and food, trying to evade the constables, sleeping on the streets or in the barns or wherever they could find shelter. He had to be tough. Sometimes he believed himself to be more an animal than a person when he was hungry and hadn't eaten for days. One day his friends had accosted a young, dark-haired girl who had a basket of bread in her arm. She wasn't making it easy for them. "You go on and get out of here," she shouted, her stance straight and defiant. "This is for the mistress, and she'll have my hide if I don't get back to her." 3 boys faced her as she backed up to the stone warehouse wall just off Duckwood Street. 2 boys moved in on each side of her while the others stayed in her path in case she ran. 1 boy moved to her left while she clutched a basket in her hand and tried to grab some bread. "We won't take it all," he said. "You won't take any," she returned. She swung her right arm around and struck the boy across the face before quickly putting her back to the wall again. Teddy had just received a few coins from mucking out the horse stalls at the stables at Government House. He was going back toward the docks when he saw the commotion. The girl must have tried to take a shortcut between the buildings. He admired her courage, and she refused to look down from the bigger boys. "Now, lads, what have we got here?" Teddy asked casually. "We just want a few pieces of bread," the taller boy answered, while still keeping the girl in his sights. Teddy, probably a year older than any of the 3, pulled out a 5-cent piece, half of what he just earned, and tossed it to the boys. "How about you leave the young lady alone?" The 3 wrestled for the coin as they moved away. "Friends of yours?" the girl asked. "Maybe," said Teddy. "I'm Teddy. Lavina." "Where are you headed?" "Jackson's on Carpathian Road," she replied. "You should be all right from here," Teddy said. "Maybe I won't." Teddy grinned. "I'd walk with you, miss, but I've just come from the stables." "It's Lavinia, and I don't mind," said the girl. "Just keep your distance." Her eyes sparkled as she spoke. They talked until they got to the door. "Teddy," Lavinia tossed him a piece of bread. "That's for the nickel. I get off after supper and might need a walk home." Teddy grinned the whole way back to Water Street. When he reached the dock, a dark-haired girl, a year or so his senior, accosted him. Her hair was braided, yet looked matted and flyaway all at the same time. A scowl crossed her dirty brow before she threw a punch at his face. Teddy grabbed her fist before she could land the blow. "What's that for, Rosie?" "The bread, that's what." "You mean this bread?" Teddy took the loaf from beneath his coat, pulled it in half, and tossed it to her. Rosie grabbed a portion and sank her teeth into the end, tearing off a bite. He did the same with his half. He eyed her while they chewed. She was pretty enough, if he were to notice such a thing. After swallowing, he said, "I told you I'd bring you something back." "Boys said you stopped him from taking the basket from the girl. They had their money spent and bellies full before they got back. Didn't bring me anything either." "They're a selfish bunch, Rosie," Teddy said. "You know that. She looked skyward and then glanced around the docks. Rain's coming. Where are you staying tonight? I left the hayloft open at the barns. I'm heading back there later. You? Don't know yet. The girls on the dock say I'm old enough to join them. Maybe tonight's tonight. Don't do that. Come with me. I have a dry place tonight. Rosie had shown up on the streets early spring the year before. At first she was mercilessly bullied by all of them. Although he pitied her, Teddy couldn't show it. That would make him weak in the eyes of the others. He'd worked too hard to gain importance in the street hierarchy, and he couldn't risk losing his place. The weak didn't survive. He didn't expect her to make it through the summer, but somehow she had. He remembered the day the man tried to haul her into his carriage. Rosie kicked and screamed and struggled to get clear, but he held her fast. 2 police officers ran to the scene, and Teddy overheard the man say he was her father. She was cursing him and calling him names. One of the policemen struck her arm with his stick to release her hold on the carriage. She yelped with pain, but she would not let go. That was when Teddy really gained an admiration for her. She spat at the man and accused him of being too friendly for a real father. Many of the storekeepers and shoppers were gathering round. Teddy noticed a cart of vegetables left unattended on the sidewalk. He stood behind it and pushed with all his might. The cart overturned and turnip, potatoes, and cabbage rolled out onto the street. The vendor shouted at him and he fell in amongst the vegetables, feigning being hurt. The constables came to see what the commotion was about, and Rosie bit the arm of the man who had grabbed her and fled down the street. One of the constables helped him stand up and he limped away from the ruckus while the farmer got to stand righted with the help of some others. Teddy moved through the crowd and quickly left the area with the policeman not far behind. He saw the carriage speed out of the downtown area and as the rider whipped the horses. Rosie caught up with him the next day and thanked him. He told her to go home, that the street was no place for her. She responded that it was better than home and left it at that. That was almost a year ago. She sometimes disappeared for days and returned with black eyes or covered in bruises, but she didn't complain. The boys who Teddy moved around with tended to look out for her, and she them. Rosie nodded and they made their way to the stables. Teddy had left earlier. It was already started to rain by the time the hens went for the evening. They waited patiently at the base of a big old apple tree out of sight of the barn. Teddy pulled out some carrots he'd taken from the street vendor and shared them with her. They munched on the last of the bread. Neither of them spoke as they listened to the sound of the horses and the voices of the men on the other side of the fence. When the way was clear, Teddy ducked low and ran along behind the edge of the whitewashed pickets. He'd hidden a ladder there. He threw it over the fence and motioned for Rosie, who followed his lead, and before long they were pulling the ladder up through the hay shaft on the loft of the stable. He carefully closed the wooden door behind him. It creaked if he didn't lift it while shutting it. She sat cross-legged on the hay as he put the ladder to the side. Dust was flying everywhere in the gray light from the window at the other side of the loft. He searched around under the edge of the hay and pulled out a blanket that was used to cover the horses on cold nights. He threw it to Rosie. That will keep you warm. More dust flew, stirred by the force of the blanket, hitting the planks near her. What about you? I'll be all right. I have to leave for a bit, but I'll be back. Teddy hoped he would meet the young lady he'd walked to work earlier that morning. You're safe here. The horses stomped below as Rosie moved back toward the bundle of hay and shook out the blanket. It settled on the dry straw near the back of the loft. She patted it down so that it wouldn't be too lumpy. "I've had worse places to sleep," she said. "I've got to go," Teddy said. He pushed out the ladder and fixed the hatch, then hid it once more behind before racing off the Carpathian Road to walk Lavinia home. The rain and drizzle had soaked his ragged coat, and he shivered slightly when Lavinia came down the step. She grinned at him when he moved out into view from the other side of the road. "I see you didn't forget about me," she said. A warmth that started in his belly and flowed through him was something that he hadn't experienced before. Teddy grinned at her, and she linked her arm in through his. "How could I forget a lady such as yourself?" Conversation was easy, and before he knew it, they had arrived at her house. She boldly and quickly kissed his cheek and ran toward the door. "Good night, Teddy." "Good night, Lavinia." He wanted to ask her when he could see her again, but his tongue was the full of his mouth. Lavinia called out from the porch, "I could use an escort the same time tomorrow evening." She closed the door and was gone before he could answer. Teddy whistled the whole way back to the barn. He could hear the soft sounds of Rosie's breathing when he got inside. It was hard to be quiet in the darkness. He found another blanket near the trough below. Wrapping it around himself, he settled into the hay. Despite the wet clothes, the night seemed a whole lot warmer as he closed his eyes. Rosie dropped her blanket on him and he woke abruptly. The grayness of dawn highlighted her form as he sat up. Neither made a sound as they crept from the barn just before the door creaked in the house and footfalls hit the step. A rooster crowed and a dog barked somewhere in the distance. She scurried past the apple tree when Rosie turned to Teddy. "Late night?" "Something like that." "Heading down to the docks?" "Nope, I'm going to wait around and head back to the barn to look for a few hours' work." "I'll see you around." "Sure," Teddy said. He knew Rosie was headed to the convent on Queen's Road. The nuns set out breakfast for her if she was there early enough before they left for the day. She wasn't always successful. If the sisters were off tending to the sick at night, they wouldn't be there. But Rosie got a meal, or 2 or 3 times a week, because of her persistence. There was no work for Teddy that day, so he headed to the docks to see if he could pick up something to make a few cents. He hated having to scavenge behind the diners where he could get 2-day-old bread for a penny and a couple of slices of meat from the butcher for a few more. It wasn't much, but it got him through the week. He shared when he could, but that wasn't often. Each of them had their own territory for foraging, and some days were better than others. They usually met before supper in the woods near Victoria Park. They had built a little shelter there, out of crates and boards they found mostly in the alleys. It was cold and damp on rainy nights and didn't offer much protection from the elements. But it did the job when there was nowhere else. Last year, one of the boys found a piece of canvas which they used on the roof. That was Bobby, he believed. Bobby had been gone since just before the winter. Nobody knew what happened to him. He was probably dead. There was no way of knowing. That's the way things were. You grew up on the streets, or you didn't. What happened if you were lucky enough to grow up was a mystery. Teddy was one of the oldest boys on the street now since Bobby was gone. Therefore, he had a higher rank, so to speak. He hadn't gotten to the position without proving himself, nor did anyone. Teddy hated to lose his human side when things were desperate. But he had to do what it took, and he knew how to do that. He didn't have to like it, but he did it anyway. Survival was survival, and it wasn't always easy, but it was easier to do every time something had to be done. Every evening that Lavinia worked, Teddy walked her home. They spent more and more time together. She saw the good in him. Teddy, money is not related to goodness. Believe me, I know from working with the Jacksons. She continually told him that he was worthy and that he could make something of himself if given the chance. He tried harder to earn a few coins instead of stealing, but sometimes when he was hungry and penniless, he did things that he didn't tell Lavinia about. She often snuck him food from the Jacksons when he didn't have any money. Rosie gave him a wide berth once he started seeing Lavinia. You think you're too good for the likes of me, she said. What are you talking about, Rosie? I thought you had eyes for me, Teddy. Rosie lowered her eyes and she played with her hands when she spoke. When she was like this, she reminded him of the Rosie he knew the year before, and not the hardened Rosie she'd become. Only to help you, Rosie, only to help you. So you do think yourself too good for the likes of me? Teddy saw the hardness return to her eyes. That's not what I said. What's gotten into you? Not a thing, said Rosie. I thought we'd get off the streets together, that's all. I don't have a way off the streets, he said. I do. She wrung her hands again and looked at him beneath hooded eyes. How? Laura and Geraldine want me to hang out with them, Rosie told him. They said I could make some money. That's a hard life, Rosie. I've seen harder. I don't know, Teddy countered. There sure have been a lot of Geraldines and Lauras since I came here. I got nothing else. I'm tired and hungry more often than anything. What about the convent? Rosie laughed. There's no God going to take me in. Besides, my father would have to sign for me, and he won't do that. With that, she threw her arms around Teddy and tried to kiss him. Startled, he pushed her away. What are you doing, Rosie? Too good to take what I'm offering, she spat at him. Some day, Teddy White, you'll regret throwing me aside. You mark my words. Before she could say anything, she turned and ran toward the harbour. He didn't see her after that and gave her little thought as time passed. So that is it for chapter 10. And next week I'll read chapter 11 and 12 to finish out the Lavinia part of the story, if you're interested. So I will check and see if there's any questions on the board. And remember what I said, however many people would like to comment, you'll be put in for a draw for a free book. And we'll get it sent out to you from Flanker Press. Crystalline, hi Crystalline and Karen and Jill. There's at least 25 people on. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you all. Colleen. Lots joining tonight. That's great. Thank you, Donna. I always expect to see Donna and Ed here for some reason. They never miss. Christine from way over in British Columbia says she doesn't have this one yet. And Tammy is here from Sydney, and Karen from out around the Bay, and Beatrice is here, my friend Beatrice. Colleen says she has several books from Flanker. And Carol Dupont, bonjour, Carol. And Sherry is listening. Elizabeth Power, love this book, thank you. And Ben, awesome to hear, thank you, Ben. Christine, looking forward to reading this, sounds interesting. And Beatrice, I don't see a question yet. Loved the book, thanks Anne, loved all your books, and congratulations. Darlene is there, Anita. We'll be reading this one soon. Thank you, Anita. Stephanie said she loves the rhythm of my prose, and she's all the way in Boston. And Kenny is on. So proud. I loves you, Kenny. And Jill said she needs a signed copy. So Jill is way over in Winnipeg. And Kathy's in Nova Scotia. Michelle is in way over in Saskatchewan. Boys, you're from all over the place tonight. And Susan says she has my books and she loves them all. Thanks, Tom. Great book. Okay, I don't think I missed any questions. So I just want to give you a little tiny background about the Lavinia piece of this story. So this is actually based on a true story from Newfoundland. So everything in this book is actually based on true stories that I kind of wove together. But the Lavinia one is based on something that happened in the 1700s, but I thought it was interesting enough, so I actually put it in this book. And so next week, you'll read a little bit more about what happened, or I'll read a little bit more about what happened, and that will clue up the Lavinia part. But I just wanted to let you know that it is based on true story. So most of this, and the piece I read last week, again, was based on a true story. And at the back of the book, I reference the areas where I researched and got the information. So it was very interesting. I actually love looking up the history of Newfoundland. It's not always good, but it makes a good story. And anybody that commented will be entered for a book and a signed copy, of course. Let me see if there's any questions. Lots of comments. I love it. I don't know if I should be scrolling up or should be scrolling down. Scrolling down. Mary's on. Hi, Mary. Where did you do your research for the children and their life on the street during this time? I actually read a few. So Ed asks, where did I do my research for the children and their life on the street? So in this one, I referenced that Teddy's father was killed in a riot during voting, and that too is a real piece of history. I believe there was 6 people killed at a poll booth one night during voting. It was a lot more difficult to vote then and walk away than it is now. It wasn't as seamless as what it was. So I was looking in the rooms, and I've had some research done, and I came across some articles about the life of children, and it kind of came from my research from the Promise as well, where the children were put in the orphanage, and some that were fortunate enough to go to the orphanage were better off than the ones that ended up on the street. So that's kind of where the information came from, but most of it then was in my head. Stacy wants to know, have I written any more of Nan's story, this mom's story, this week? So I have written a little, Stacy. Stacy was very impressed. I read her the first and the last of the story, so she was very impressed with that last week. Jill says she loves all my books, include local history, and Delia's on. Hi, Delia. Do you like writing these books? Asked Tommy. I actually do. I really like the historical part, but I took some courses over the last 20 weeks with Matthew Ledrew, and he is more into kind of science fiction genre and things like that. And I started a book along that line too. So, and I'm enjoying that. And I'm also writing Mom's story too. So I'm enjoying that. So I have 3 competing priorities right now. But anyway, I just enjoy writing. I like to be able to sit down and write, but I do like the history side. Any more questions? Veronica says she's looking forward to my mom's story. I am too. I'm kind of torn that I haven't got it done yet, but I am looking forward to finishing it. And as I mentioned last week, I sat her down and we did some interviewing for 3 days. So I got lots of information and I got it all recorded. So and any pieces that I'm missing, I just phones her and says, hey, what about that? I missed that part or something, and she'll tell me. Anybody else got any questions? So going once, we're a little over a half hour, so that's pretty good. Going twice. So again, I'll be drawing tomorrow morning for a free copy of The Liars, and we'll see who, I'll post in the comments here who the lucky winner is. I'm considering you will be lucky, even though it might be a little bit boastful because it is my book, but I will say you will be the lucky winner. So thank you to everybody who came along, and thanks Donna. I love that Donna comes every week. She's there for all my readings, so thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. All right, thank you everybody, and have a great evening and a great weekend. Bye.